The blood was already freezing on the steps by the time Fiona Lambert realized she could not feel her legs, and somewhere in the howling December wind, she heard her stepfather's boots retreating back into the house as if nothing had happened at all. Silver Peak, Nevada was not known for its harsh winters, but 1883 had brought something different to the high desert mountains, a cold that settled into the bones and refused to let go. Fiona lay crumpled at the bottom of the wooden porch stairs, her breath coming in short gasps that created small clouds in the frigid air. The sky above was that particular shade of gray that promised more snow, and she could see it beginning to fall, soft flakes landing on her eyelashes and melting from the warmth of her tears. She had been 20 years old for exactly 3 weeks when her stepfather, Harold Moss, had finally made good on his threats. Her mother had been dead for 2 years now, consumption taking her slowly through one agonizing summer, and Fiona had stayed because she had nowhere else to go. Harold had inherited her mother's small house on the edge of Silver Peak, and with it, he seemed to believe he had inherited ownership of Fiona as well. When she had refused his advances that morning, when she had finally found the courage to tell him she would rather freeze in the street than spend another day under his roof, he had simply smiled that terrible smile and asked if she would like to test that theory. The push had been quick. One moment she was standing at the top of the stairs with her carpet bag in hand, ready to walk away from the only home she had left, and the next she was airborne, tumbling down the icy steps with nothing to grab onto. She heard the crack when her head hit the 4th step, felt the explosion of pain when her ribs connected with the edge of the 6th, and then there was only the cold ground and the realization that her left leg was bent at an angle that legs should never bend. Fiona tried to move, tried to call for help, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. The street was empty. Most sensible people were inside by their fires on a day like this. The wind picked up, cutting through her thin dress and the shawl she had managed to wrap around her shoulders before Harold had ended the argument with violence. She could feel consciousness slipping away, could feel her body starting to shut down from the cold and the shock, and she wondered if this was how it would end, frozen on the steps of a house that had stopped being a home the day her mother died. She did not know how long she lay there. Minutes felt like hours. The snow was covering her now, a white blanket that might have been peaceful under different circumstances. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges when she heard it, the sound of hoofbeats on the frozen road, slowing, then stopping. She tried to lift her head but could not manage it. Jesus Christ! The voice was male, deep and rough with concern. Madam, can you hear me? Fiona managed to open her eyes wider. Through the falling snow, she could make out a figure dismounting from a dark horse, a man in a long coat and wide-brimmed hat. He was tall, she could tell that much, and he moved with the quick efficiency of someone who had seen trouble before and knew how to handle it. I can hear you, she whispered, her lips barely forming the words. The man dropped to his knees beside her and she got her first clear look at his face. He was young, maybe 25 or 26, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that were such a striking shade of blue-green that even through her pain, she noticed them. His jaw was covered with a few days' worth of stubble, and there was a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, but his face was kind, genuinely worried as he looked down at her. My name is Elijah Larkin, he said, already shrugging out of his heavy coat. I'm going to help you, but I need to know where you are hurt. Everywhere, Fiona managed, and felt tears sliding down her frozen cheeks. My leg, I think it is broken. My ribs. My head. Elijah's jaw tightened as he took in her injuries, and then his eyes moved up to the house, to the door that was firmly shut, to the steps covered in ice and blood. She saw understanding dawn in his expression, saw anger flash across his features before he controlled it. Did someone do this to you? He asked quietly. Fiona hesitated. In a town like Silver Peak, you did not accuse men like Harold Moss of anything. He owned the general store, sat on the town council, went to church every Sunday with his Bible under his arm and his lies on his tongue. But something in Elijah's eyes made her want to tell the truth. My stepfather, she whispered. Harold Moss. He pushed me. Elijah's hands clenched into fists for just a moment before he forced them to relax. We will deal with that, he said, his voice hard as iron. But first, we need to get you warm and dry before you freeze to death. I'm going to have to move you, and it is going to hurt. I'm sorry for that." "I do not think I can hurt worse than I already do," Fiona said, attempting something like a smile. "You might be surprised," Elijah said, but there was gentleness in his tone. "Try to stay conscious for me, all right?" He wrapped his coat around her carefully, then slid one arm under her shoulders and the other beneath her knees. When he lifted her, Fiona could not stop the cry of pain that tore from her throat. Her broken leg shifted, and white-hot agony shot through her entire body. She felt herself starting to pass out and heard Elijah's voice cutting through the darkness. "Stay with me," he said urgently. "Come on, stay with me. What is your name?" "Fiona," she gasped. "Fiona Lambert." "Well, Fiona Lambert, you are going to be just fine," Elijah said, carrying her toward his horse with surprising care, despite his long strides. "I promise you that." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that someone in this world might actually keep a promise made to her. But as he lifted her onto his horse and climbed up behind her, wrapping his arms around her to keep her secure against his chest, all she could do was close her eyes and try not to scream every time the horse took a step. "Where are we going?" she managed to ask. "My place," Elijah said. "It is not far, just outside of town. I have a ranch, just me and my horses and a lot of empty space. You will be safe there." "He will come looking," Fiona said, her words starting to slur. "Harold? He will come." "Let him," Elijah said, and there was something in his voice that made Fiona think Harold Moss might finally meet someone he could not bully. "Let him try." The ride took maybe 15 minutes, but to Fiona it felt like an eternity. Every movement of the horse sent fresh waves of pain through her body, and she could feel herself fading in and out of consciousness. Elijah kept talking to her, his voice a steady anchor in the storm of hurt and cold. "I raise horses," he was saying, "Mustangs mostly. I catch them wild and gentle them, then sell them to ranchers who need good stock. It is honest work, and it keeps me busy. I have been in Silver Peak for about 3 years now. Came from Wyoming originally, but I wanted a place of my own, somewhere I could build something that mattered." Fiona tried to focus on his words, tried to use them to stay present, but it was so hard. She was so cold, and the pain was so intense, and part of her just wanted to slip away into the darkness where nothing could hurt anymore. "Stay with me, Fiona," Elijah said again, his arms tightening around her. "We are almost there, just a little farther." When they finally reached the ranch, Fiona was barely conscious. She had vague impressions of a small but sturdy house, a barn, corrals with horses moving restlessly in the falling snow. Elijah dismounted and lifted her down with the same careful gentleness, then carried her toward the house. The warmth inside hit her like a wall. There was a fire burning in the stone fireplace, and the single large room that made up the main living space was simple but clean. She saw a kitchen area in one corner, a table with 2 chairs, a comfortable-looking armchair near the fire. Elijah carried her past all of this to a doorway that led to a small bedroom. The bed was neatly made with thick quilts, and he laid her down on it as carefully as if she were made of glass. Fiona could not stop the tears now. The warmth was making her injuries hurt even more, if that was possible, and she was suddenly, desperately aware of how close she had come to dying on those steps. "I know," Elijah said softly, pulling a chair up beside the bed and sitting down. "I know it hurts, but you are safe now, and we are going to take care of you." "We?" Fiona asked through her tears. "I need to go get the doctor," Elijah said. "That leg needs to be set properly, and you might have a concussion from that head wound. But I'm going to get you warmed up first, and then I will ride into town as fast as I can." He moved around the room with efficient purpose, building up the fire in the small hearth in the bedroom, bringing in blankets and hot water. He helped her remove her wet, blood-stained dress, keeping his eyes averted respectfully, and replaced it with one of his own flannel shirts that was far too big for her, but blissfully warm and dry. When he went to examine her leg, Fiona had to bite down on a folded cloth to keep from screaming. It is definitely broken," Elijah said, his face grim. "I'm not going to try to set it myself. That is a job for Doc Morrison. But I'm going to splint it as best I can to keep it stable until he can get here." He fashioned a rough splint from pieces of wood and torn cloth, working as gently as possible while Fiona fought to stay conscious through the pain. When he was done, he pressed a cool cloth to the wound on her head, cleaning away the blood, and she saw his jaw tighten again at the sight of the ugly gash. Your ribs are probably cracked or broken too, he said. I'm going to wrap them, but carefully. Can you sit up a little if I help you? It took every ounce of strength Fiona had left, but with Elijah supporting her, she managed to lean forward enough for him to wind cloth around her torso, providing support for her damaged ribs. By the time he lowered her back down to the pillows, she was shaking with exhaustion and pain. I'm going to get the doctor now, Elijah said, covering her with several quilts. I will be as fast as I can, but it might take an hour or more. Will you be all right until I get back? I will try, Fiona whispered. Elijah hesitated, then reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. You are stronger than you know, he said. Anyone who could survive what you just went through, anyone who could stay conscious through me splinting that leg, has more courage than most men I have known. You are going to make it through this, Fiona, I promise. There was that word again. Promise. Fiona looked up at this stranger who had appeared out of the snow like an answer to a prayer she had not known she was praying, and she found herself wanting to believe him. Why are you helping me? She asked. You do not even know me. Something flickered in Elijah's eyes, something that looked like old pain. Let us just say I know what it is like to be hurt by someone who was supposed to protect you, he said quietly. And I made a promise to myself a long time ago that if I ever had the chance to stop that from happening to someone else, I would take it. So that's what I'm doing. Before Fiona could respond, he was gone, his boots echoing across the wooden floor, the door opening and closing. She heard his horse galloping away through the snow, and then there was only silence and the crackle of the fire and her own labored breathing. She must have drifted in and out of consciousness because the next thing she knew, there were voices in the other room. Elijah had returned, and he had brought someone with him. A moment later, an older man with silver hair and kind eyes appeared in the doorway, carrying a black medical bag. Miss Lambert, he said, his voice professionally calm. I'm Dr. Morrison. Mr. Larkin tells me you have had quite an ordeal. Let us see what we can do to help you feel better. The next hour was a blur of pain. Dr. Morrison confirmed that her leg was badly broken, 2 places in the tibia, and he had to reset the bones. Elijah held her down while she screamed into a leather strap the doctor had placed between her teeth. Her ribs were indeed cracked, 3 of them on her left side, and the gash on her head required 8 stitches. Through it all, Elijah stayed beside her, his hand gripping hers, his voice murmuring words of encouragement that she barely heard through the agony. When it was finally over, Dr. Morrison gave her something for the pain, some kind of laudanum mixture that made the world go soft and blurry. She heard him talking to Elijah in low tones in the other room. She is lucky you found her when you did, the doctor was saying. Another hour in that cold and she would have been dead. As it is, she's going to need weeks of recovery, maybe months before that leg is healed enough to walk on. And someone needs to stay with her, at least for the first few days. She should not be alone. She will stay here, Elijah said firmly. I will take care of her. That is generous of you, Elijah, but people will talk. A young, unmarried woman staying at a bachelor's ranch. Let them talk, Elijah said. I am more concerned with keeping her alive than I am with gossip. Besides, if what she told me is true, Harold Moss is the one who did this to her. Are you really going to send her back to that house? There was a long pause. Harold Moss is a respected member of this community, Dr. Morrison said carefully. Harold Moss is a monster who pushes women downstairs, Elijah said, his voice hard. And if he comes looking for her here, he's going to find out what happens to men who hurt people I'm protecting. Be careful, Elijah, the doctor warned. Harold has friends on the town council, friends who wear badges. You go after him, you might find yourself in more trouble than you can handle. I will worry about that when the time comes, Elijah said. Right now, all that matters is making sure Fiona is safe and gets better. Fiona felt her eyes closing, felt the laudanum pulling her down into sleep. The last thing she was aware of was Elijah coming back into the bedroom, the sound of the chair being pulled close to the bed, and the feeling of his hand taking hers again. Sleep, he said softly. I will be right here. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Fiona Lambert felt safe. When she woke, it was dark outside, and the fire had burned down to embers. For a moment, she could not remember where she was, and panic seized her. Then she turned her head, ignoring the sharp pain the movement caused, and saw Elijah asleep in the chair beside her bed, his hand still holding hers, his head tipped back against the wall at what had to be an uncomfortable angle. She studied him in the dim light filtering in from the other room. He had strong features, a face that looked like it had seen hard times, but had not let those times make it cruel. There was something inherently trustworthy about him, something that made her want to believe his promises, even though every man she had ever known had taught her that promises were just words that meant nothing. As if sensing her gaze, Elijah stirred and opened his eyes. When he saw she was awake, he sat up straighter, and she could see the concern in his expression. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I was pushed down a flight of stairs," Fiona said, and was surprised to hear herself make something like a joke. The laudanum must still be affecting her. A small smile tugged at Elijah's mouth. "Fair enough. Are you in pain? Dr. Morrison left more medicine." "I am all right for now," Fiona said, though that was not entirely true. Her whole body ached, a deep bone-level hurt that she suspected would be her companion for a long time. "What time is it?" "Middle of the night," Elijah said. "Around 2 a.m, I would guess. You have been asleep for about 8 hours. You stayed beside me the whole time?" "I told you I would be right here," Elijah said simply. Fiona felt something tighten in her chest, an emotion she could not quite name. "You should go sleep in your own bed," she said. "I've already taken over your room." "The chair is fine," Elijah said. "And besides, you might need something during the night. It is better if I am close." "I have been taking care of myself for a long time," Fiona said, but there was no heat in the words. The truth was, it felt impossibly good to have someone want to take care of her, even if she knew it could not last. "I am sure you have," Elijah said, "but everyone needs help sometimes. There's no shame in that." They sat in silence for a moment, and then Fiona asked the question that had been nagging at her since she woke. "Did Harold come looking for me?" Elijah's expression darkened. "Not yet, but he will. Men like him always do." "What will you do when he does?" Fiona asked. "Tell him you are under my protection," Elijah said, "and that if he wants to get to you, he will have to go through me first." "He is not the kind of man who responds well to threats," Fiona warned. "Neither am I," Elijah said, and there was something in his voice that made Fiona believe him. She studied him for a long moment. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. "You said something earlier about knowing what it was like to be hurt by someone who was supposed to protect you. What did you mean?" Elijah looked away, his jaw tightening. For a moment she thought he would not answer. Then he sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "My father was a drunk," he said quietly. "A mean one. He used to take his anger out on my mother, on me and my sisters, on anyone who was nearby when he got into a mood. I spent my whole childhood trying to protect my mother and sisters from him, trying to be big enough, strong enough, to stand between them and his fists. But I was just a kid. I could not always stop him." "I am sorry," Fiona said softly. "When I was 16, he came home drunk one night and started going after my mother with a fireplace poker. I tried to stop him, and we fought. I was bigger than him by then, stronger. I beat him badly. Not enough to kill him, but close. And then I left. Took my mother and sisters to my aunt's house 2 towns over, and I left. I have not seen him since." "That was brave," Fiona said. "It was necessary," Elijah corrected, "but it taught me something. It taught me that sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to stand up to them, to show them that you are not afraid and you are not going to back down. That is what I plan to do with Harold Moss." "He has powerful friends," Fiona said again. "So do I," Elijah said. "Maybe not on the town council, but I know people in this territory, people who care about what is right more than they care about who has money or influence. If it comes to that, we will find a way to make sure Harold answers for what he did to you." Fiona wanted to believe him, but she had lived under Harold's control for too long to think it would be that easy. Men like Harold always found a way to win, to twist the story until they were the victims and everyone else was to blame. But she was too tired and hurt to argue. Instead, she just nodded and closed her eyes. "Try to sleep some more," Elijah said gently. "Your body needs rest to heal." "Will you stay?" Fiona asked and hated how small and vulnerable her voice sounded. "I'm not going anywhere," Elijah promised, and once again she felt his hand take hers. This time when sleep claimed her. It was deep and dreamless. The next days passed in a haze of pain and medicine and slow healing. Elijah proved to be a patient and capable caregiver. He helped her with things she could not do herself, always respectful, always gentle. He made sure she ate, brought her books to read, sat beside her bed in the evenings and told her stories about his life, about the horses he raised, about the places he had been. Fiona found herself looking forward to those evening conversations more than she wanted to admit. There was something about Elijah that made her feel safe, made her feel like maybe the world was not entirely full of men like Harold Moss. He made her laugh with stories about stubborn horses and his failed attempts at cooking. He listened when she talked about her mother, about the life she had lost when consumption took the only person who had truly loved her. On the third day, Harold finally came. Fiona was propped up in bed, her leg immobilized in its splint, reading a dime novel Elijah had brought her, when she heard the sound of a wagon approaching. Her whole body went rigid with fear. "Elijah," she called, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. He appeared in the doorway immediately, and she saw that he had already heard the wagon. His expression was calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Stay here," he said, "and do not worry. I will handle this." "Be careful," Fiona said, "please." Elijah nodded and disappeared. She heard the front door open, heard boots on the wooden porch. Then she heard Harold's voice, and her blood ran cold. "I am looking for my stepdaughter," Harold was saying, his tone all false concern. "Fiona Lambert. There was an accident, and she ran off before I could help her. I've been so worried." "Your stepdaughter is here," Elijah said, his voice hard and level, "and she told me all about your accident." "I am sure she did," Harold said, and Fiona could hear the sneer in his voice even from the other room. "The girl has always had an active imagination. Now, if you will just let me see her, I can take her home and get her the care she needs." "She is not going anywhere with you," Elijah said flatly. "She is staying here, under my protection, until she is healed." "That is not your decision to make, boy," Harold said, his voice turning cold. "Fiona is my responsibility, legally speaking. Her mother was my wife, and that makes the girl mine until she marries or turns 21. Now step aside." "No," Elijah said simply. There was a moment of silence, and Fiona could feel the tension crackling through the air like lightning about to strike. "You are making a mistake," Harold said softly, and there was menace in his tone. "I have friends in this town, friends who will not take kindly to you interfering in family business." "Family business?" Elijah repeated, and Fiona could hear the anger barely controlled in his voice. "Is that what you call pushing a woman down a flight of stairs? Is that what you call leaving her to freeze to death in the snow?" "I did no such thing," Harold said, all wounded innocence. "Fiona slipped on the ice. It was a tragic accident. If she told you different, she is lying." "Get off my property," Elijah said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, "and do not come back. If you try to take Fiona, if you try to hurt her again, I will make sure everyone in this territory knows exactly what kind of man you really are." "You think anyone will believe you?" Harold laughed, but there was an edge to it. "I am a respected member of this community. You're just some drifter who raises horses. My word will carry a lot more weight than yours." "Maybe," Elijah said, "but I am willing to test that. Are you?" Another silence. Then Fiona heard footsteps retreating, heard Harold's voice call back. "This is not over, Larkin. That girl belongs to me, and I will get her back one way or another." "Come near her again, and you will regret it," Elijah said. Fiona heard the wagon pulling away, heard Elijah come back inside. When he appeared in the doorway, his face was tight with anger. "He is gone," Elijah said, "but he will be back." "I know," Fiona said, and she was surprised by how calm her own voice sounded. "He always gets what he wants." "Not this time," Elijah said fiercely. He came and sat on the edge of her bed, taking both her hands in his. "I meant what I said, Fiona. You are under my protection now, and I am not going to let him hurt you again. I do not care what it takes." Looking into his eyes, seeing the determination there, the genuine care, Fiona felt something shift inside her chest. This man, this stranger who had saved her life, was willing to stand between her and Harold Moss, was willing to risk his own safety, his own reputation, to keep her safe. She had never known anyone like him. "Thank you," she whispered, and found that the words felt painfully inadequate for what she was actually feeling. Elijah smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "You're welcome. Now, how about some lunch? I was thinking I could attempt to make soup without burning it." Despite everything, Fiona laughed. That would be wonderful. As the days turned into weeks, Fiona's body slowly began to heal. The pain lessened, the bruises faded from black to purple to green to yellow. Dr. Morrison came to check on her progress, declared himself satisfied with how the leg was setting, and told her she was lucky to have Elijah looking after her. And Elijah did look after her, with a patience and gentleness that Fiona had not known existed in men. He helped her sit up, helped her with the necessary but embarrassing tasks that came with being bedridden, never making her feel ashamed or uncomfortable. He read to her when her head hurt too much to focus on the pages herself. He brought her wildflowers that somehow managed to survive in the winter landscape, placing them in a jar beside her bed. But more than any of that, he talked to her. Really talked to her like her thoughts and opinions mattered. He asked her about her dreams, about what she wanted to do with her life once she was healed. He told her about his own plans, about how he wanted to build his ranch into something significant, how he wanted to be known for raising the best horses in Nevada. And slowly, carefully, Fiona felt herself beginning to care for him. It terrified her. She had spent so long learning not to trust men, learning to see them as threats or obstacles. But Elijah was different. He was kind without expecting anything in return. He was strong without being violent. He made her feel safe and valued, and like maybe, just maybe, she could have a future that did not involve fear. It was about 6 weeks after the accident when Fiona finally managed to stand for the first time. Elijah had fashioned her a crutch, and with his help, she levered herself up out of the bed. Her left leg was still weak and painful, but she could put a little weight on it. The sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. "I am standing," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Elijah, I am standing." He was grinning at her, his hands still supporting her elbows, ready to catch her if she fell. "You are standing," he agreed. "You are doing great." "I could not have done this without you," Fiona said, looking up at him. They were close, she realized suddenly, close enough that she could see the different shades of color in his eyes, close enough to feel his breath on her face. "Yes, you could have," Elijah said softly. "You are the strongest person I have ever met, Fiona Lambert. You would have found a way." "I do not feel strong," Fiona admitted. "Most of the time I feel terrified." "Courage is not about not being afraid," Elijah said. "It is about being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. You have more of that than anyone I have ever known." They stood there for a long moment, just looking at each other, and Fiona felt her heart beginning to race. She knew what was happening, knew what she was feeling, and it scared her almost as much as Harold had. Because caring about someone meant they could hurt you. Caring about someone gave them power over you. But as she looked into Elijah's eyes, she found herself wanting to take that risk anyway. "Elijah," she started to say, but before she could finish, there was a loud knock on the front door. The moment shattered. Elijah eased her back down onto the bed, making sure she was stable before he went to answer the door. Fiona heard voices, heard Elijah speaking with someone, and then he returned with Sheriff Tom Bradley following behind him. The sheriff was a middle-aged man with a thick mustache and tired eyes. He nodded respectfully to Fiona before turning to Elijah. "Mr. Larkin," he said, "I need to talk to you about Harold Moss." Fiona felt her blood run cold. "What about him?" Sheriff Bradley looked uncomfortable. "He has filed a complaint, says you are keeping Miss Lambert here against her will, that you have kidnapped her and are holding her hostage." "That's absurd," Elijah said, his voice tight with anger. "I know it probably is," the sheriff said, "but I still need to hear from Miss Lambert herself. Madam, are you here of your own free will?" "Yes," Fiona said firmly. "Absolutely yes. Harold is lying, Sheriff. He is the one who hurt me. He pushed me down the stairs and left me to die in the snow. Elijah saved my life." Sheriff Bradley sighed. "That's what Dr. Morrison said too. But Miss Lambert, you have to understand, Harold Moss is a powerful man in this town. Without proof of what he did, without witnesses, it is your word against his." "Are you saying you believe him?" Fiona asked, her voice rising. "I am saying the law does not care what I believe," Sheriff Bradley said. "It cares what can be proven. And right now, all I have is 2 conflicting stories and no way to know which one is true." "You know which one is true," Elijah said quietly. "You know Harold Moss, Sheriff. You know what kind of man he is." The sheriff looked away. "What I know and what I can prove are two different things. Look, I will tell Harold that Miss Lambert is here of her own accord and that there's nothing I can do about it. But Mr. Larkin, you need to be careful. Harold is not the kind of man who lets things go. If he has decided he wants Miss Lambert back, he will find a way. Let him try, Elijah said. After the sheriff left, Fiona and Elijah sat in heavy silence. The fragile, hopeful moment from before felt very far away now. Maybe I should leave, Fiona said finally. Go somewhere far away where Harold cannot find me. Where would you go? Elijah asked. You have no money, no family, and your leg is still healing. And besides, he added, looking directly at her, I do not want you to leave. Fiona's breath caught. You do not? No, Elijah said simply. I like having you here, Fiona. I like talking to you. I like seeing you get stronger every day. I like the way you laugh at my terrible jokes and the way you argue with me about books. I do not want you to leave. Elijah, Fiona whispered. He moved closer, sitting on the edge of her bed. I know this is probably too soon, he said. I know you have been through hell, and the last thing you need is me complicating things, but I need you to know that this, you being here, it has meant something to me. You mean something to me. Fiona felt tears welling in her eyes. You mean something to me, too, she admitted. More than I thought possible. You saved me, Elijah, not just from the cold, but from believing that all men were like Harold. You showed me that kindness exists, that goodness exists. I do not know what I would have done without you. You do not have to do without me, Elijah said, taking her hand. I am right here, and I am not going anywhere, unless you want me to. I do not want you to, Fiona said quickly. I want you to stay. I want to stay. I just do not know how we can make that work with Harold still out there, still trying to claim ownership over me. We will find a way, Elijah said. I promise you, we will find a way. That night, lying in bed unable to sleep, Fiona found herself thinking about the future. For so long, her future had seemed like a dark, hopeless thing, a series of days to be endured rather than lived. But now, with Elijah just in the other room, with the memory of his hand in hers and his words echoing in her mind, the future seemed like something else entirely, something bright and possible and almost within reach. If only Harold would let her have it. The answer came from an unexpected source. 2 weeks later, Dr. Morrison arrived at the ranch with a woman Fiona had never seen before. She was perhaps 50 years old, with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore a traveling dress and carried herself with the bearing of someone used to being taken seriously. Miss Lambert, Dr. Morrison said, this is Catherine Wells. She is an attorney from Carson City. An attorney? Fiona said, confused. I do not understand. Catherine Wells smiled. I specialize in cases involving women's rights, she explained. Dr. Morrison wrote to me about your situation, and I took the liberty of doing some research into Harold Moss. What I found was quite interesting. She opened her leather satchel and pulled out several documents. Harold Moss was married once before your mother, she said. Did you know that? No, Fiona said, sitting up straighter. He never mentioned it. I'm not surprised, Catherine said. His first wife died under mysterious circumstances, fell down a flight of stairs according to the official report. There was an investigation, but it went nowhere. Harold had friends, had influence. Sound familiar? Fiona felt her blood run cold. He killed his first wife? I cannot prove it. Oh, Catherine said. But the pattern is concerning, to say the least, and it is exactly the kind of thing a judge might find interesting if we were to petition for a restraining order, or better yet, to have Harold charged with assault and attempted murder. But Sheriff Bradley said there was no proof, Fiona protested. Sheriff Bradley is limited by his jurisdiction and his resources, Catherine said. I am not. I have connections with the Territorial Marshal's office, and I have experience building cases against powerful men who think they are above the law. If you are willing to testify, if you are willing to tell your story officially and under oath, I think we can make a case that will at least get Harold Moss away from you permanently. Fiona looked at Elijah, who had been standing quietly by the door. He nodded encouragingly. It is your decision, he said, but I think Miss Wells is offering you a chance to fight back, to make sure Harold cannot hurt you or anyone else ever again. Fiona thought about Harold's first wife, about the stairs, about how easily history could repeat itself, She thought about other women who might cross Harold's path, other women he might hurt. And she thought about Elijah, about the future they might have if only Harold was not standing in the way. "I will do it," she said firmly. "I will testify. I will tell my story, whatever it takes to stop him." Catherine Wells smiled, and it was a smile that held steel. "Good. Then let us get started." The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. Catherine stayed in Silver Peak, gathering statements, talking to people who had known Harold's first wife, building a case. She spoke with Dr. Morrison about Fiona's injuries. She spoke with Elijah about finding Fiona on the stairs. She even managed to find a neighbor who admitted quietly that she had seen Harold standing in the doorway at the top of the stairs, watching Fiona fall. She was too afraid to say anything before, Catherine explained, but knowing that someone is finally standing up to Harold gave her courage. The case went before a territorial judge in Carson City. Fiona, her leg still weak but healing, made the trip with Elijah and Catherine. Harold was there too, confident and sneering, surrounded by his lawyers. But when Fiona took the stand and told her story, when the neighbor testified to what she had seen, when Dr. Morrison described the injuries consistent with being pushed rather than simply falling, she saw Harold's confidence begin to crack. The judge, an older man with a reputation for fairness, listened to everything. Then he rendered his verdict. Harold Moss was found guilty of assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. He was sentenced to 5 years in the territorial prison and ordered to pay restitution to Fiona for her medical expenses and suffering. Furthermore, a permanent restraining order was issued, preventing Harold from ever contacting Fiona again. When the judge's gavel fell, Fiona felt something break open inside her, some dark, heavy thing she'd been carrying for far too long. She turned to Elijah, who was sitting beside her, and found him already looking at her, his eyes bright with emotion. "It is over," she said, barely able to believe it. "It is really over." "It is over," Elijah confirmed, and then he was pulling her into his arms, holding her tight while she cried, tears of relief and joy and release. That night, back in Silver Peak, back at the ranch that had become her home, Fiona and Elijah sat together by the fire. Her leg was propped up on a cushion, still healing but stronger every day. Elijah was in the chair beside her, his hand holding hers like always. "What will you do now?" he asked. "You are free, Fiona. Free to go anywhere, do anything." Fiona looked at him, at this man who had saved her, who had protected her, who had shown her what it meant to be truly cared for. "I think I would like to stay," she said softly, "if that is all right with you." "It is more than all right," Elijah said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "But Fiona, I need you to know that I want you to stay for the right reasons, not because you feel obligated, not because you do not have anywhere else to go. I want you to stay because you want to be here, because you want to be with me." "I do want to be here," Fiona said. "I do want to be with you, Elijah. Somewhere along the way, in between you saving my life and taking care of me and making me laugh when I thought I would never laugh again, I fell in love with you." Elijah's breath caught. "You love me?" "I love you," Fiona confirmed, and saying the words out loud felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating at once. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other for a few months, but I cannot help how I feel. You are the best man I have ever known, Elijah Larkin, and I love you." For a moment, Elijah just stared at her. Then he was out of his chair, kneeling beside her, cupping her face in his hands. "I love you too," he said fiercely. "I think I have loved you since the moment I saw you lying in the snow, looking up at me with so much pain and so much courage in your eyes. I love you, Fiona, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." And then he was kissing her, and Fiona was kissing him back, and it was everything a first kiss should be. Gentle and passionate, sweet and desperate, full of promise and hope, and the beginning of something beautiful. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. "Marry me," Elijah said, and it was not quite a question. "I know it is soon. I know we should probably wait, but I do not want to wait. I want you to be my wife, Fiona. I want to build a life with you, a real life, a good life. Will you marry me?" Fiona felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but they were happy tears this time. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church in Silver Peak. Dr. Morrison stood up for Elijah. Catherine Wells, who had stayed in town to tie up the legal loose ends, stood up for Fiona. The ceremony was simple and short, but when Elijah slipped the gold band onto Fiona's finger and kissed her as his wife, she felt like the luckiest woman in the world. The first year of their marriage was both challenging and wonderful. Fiona's leg healed slowly but surely, and by the time spring arrived, she could walk without a crutch, though she still limped when she was tired. She threw herself into learning about the ranch, about the horses Elijah raised. She had always loved animals, and she discovered that she had a natural gift with the Mustangs, a gentleness and patience that helped Elijah in his work. Together, they built the ranch into something thriving. They added more corrals, expanded the barn, took on a few hired hands to help with the work. Word spread about the quality of Elijah Larkin's horses, and buyers came from all over Nevada and beyond. The ranch prospered, and with it, so did their marriage. But more than the success of the ranch, more than the financial stability they achieved, what mattered to Fiona was the life they built together. She had never known that marriage could be a partnership, that it could be based on mutual respect and genuine affection. Elijah consulted her on every major decision, valued her opinion, listened to her ideas. He never raised his voice to her in anger, never made her feel small or worthless or afraid. And when she woke in the middle of the night with nightmares about Harold, about falling down the stairs, about the cold, Elijah was always there to hold her, to remind her that she was safe, that Harold was in prison and could not hurt her anymore. In the autumn of their second year of marriage, Fiona realized that she was pregnant. She told Elijah one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and red. "I'm going to have a baby," she said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. Elijah went very still. Then he turned to her, his eyes wide and bright. "A baby? We are going to have a baby." "We are going to have a baby," Fiona confirmed, and she was laughing and crying at the same time. Elijah pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "I'm going to be a father," he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "We are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Fiona asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy?" Elijah pulled back to look at her, and there were tears on his cheeks. "Fiona, I have never been happier in my entire life. You have given me everything, absolutely everything I ever wanted. A home, a wife I love more than anything, and now a child. I do not know what I did to deserve you, but I thank God every day that I found you in that snow." "I thank God too," Fiona said softly, "because you saved me, Elijah. In every way a person can be saved." The pregnancy was not easy. Fiona was sick for the first few months, and the memories of her mother dying from consumption made her afraid of every cough, every moment of weakness. But Elijah was patient and supportive, and Dr. Morrison assured her that she was healthy and strong and that the baby was growing well. In late spring of 1885, Fiona went into labor. It was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours, and there were moments when she was sure she could not do it, could not survive it. But Elijah never left her side, holding her hand, talking her through each contraction, telling her how strong she was, how brave, how much he loved her. When their son finally entered the world, red-faced and screaming, Fiona felt a love so intense it was almost frightening. She had not known it was possible to love someone so immediately, so completely. "He is perfect," Elijah said, his voice full of wonder as he held the tiny baby. "Fiona, he is perfect." They named him Samuel Elijah Larkin, after Elijah's grandfather, and from the moment he arrived, he became the center of their world. Fiona had worried that she would not know how to be a mother, that the years with Harold might have damaged her ability to love and nurture. But she found that loving Samuel came as naturally as breathing. She sang to him, rocked him, marveled at his tiny fingers and toes. And when she looked at Elijah holding their son, saw the gentleness and adoration in his face, she fell in love with him all over again. The years that followed were full and rich. Samuel grew from a baby into a curious, energetic little boy who loved the horses and followed his father everywhere. When he was 3, Fiona became pregnant again, and this time she delivered a daughter they named Rose Catherine, after Fiona's mother and the attorney who had helped set her free. Life on the ranch was busy and often challenging. There were droughts and hard winters, sick horses and difficult clients. But through it all, Fiona and Elijah faced everything together, their love for each other deepening with every passing year. Harold Moss was released from prison after serving 4 years of his sentence. Fiona heard about it through Dr. Morrison and felt a flutter of old fear. But Harold never came near Silver Peak again. Whether he had learned his lesson or simply did not want to risk another encounter with the law, Fiona did not know and did not care. He was out of her life, and that was all that mattered. One evening, when Samuel was 7 and Rose was 4, Fiona stood on the porch of their home, watching her children play in the yard while Elijah worked with a young horse in the corral. The setting sun cast everything in golden light, and for a moment, Fiona was overwhelmed by the sheer goodness of her life. She thought about the girl she had been, lying broken and freezing at the bottom of those stairs, sure that her life was over. She thought about all the pain and fear and hopelessness she had carried for so long. And then she thought about everything that had happened since, about the man who had saved her, and the life they had built together. Elijah finished with the horse and came to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how much has changed," Fiona said. "About how lucky I am." "We are both lucky," Elijah corrected. "I found you in the snow, Fiona, but you saved me just as much as I saved you. You gave me a reason to believe in love, in family, in building something that lasts. You gave me everything." Fiona turned to look at him, at the face she knew as well as her own now, the face she woke up to every morning, and the face she would grow old seeing. "I love you," she said. "I will love you for the rest of my life, Elijah Larkin." "And I will love you for the rest of mine," Elijah said, kissing her softly. "Forever, Fiona. That is my promise to you." And unlike so many promises she had heard before, unlike so many words that had turned out to be lies, Fiona knew that this one was true. This one would last. The ranch continued to prosper over the years. By the time Samuel was 15, he was working alongside his father full-time, showing the same natural gift with horses that both his parents possessed. Rose, quieter and more studious than her boisterous brother, developed a love for reading and helped Fiona keep the ranch's accounts and correspondence. When she was 12, she announced that she wanted to be a teacher, and both Fiona and Elijah supported her dream wholeheartedly. In 1895, when Fiona was 32 years old, they received word that Harold Moss had died in a bar fight in California. Fiona thought she would feel something at the news, some sense of closure or relief or even satisfaction, but instead, she felt mostly nothing. Harold had not been a part of her life for so long that his death barely registered as real. She had survived him, had built something beautiful in spite of him, and that was all that mattered. What did matter was the life she and Elijah continued to build. They added onto the house as their family grew, creating a real home filled with laughter and love. They became pillars of the Silver Peak community, known for their generosity and fairness. Elijah was eventually asked to serve on the town council, the very council that had once been dominated by men like Harold Moss, and he used his position to advocate for better protections for women and children. Catherine Wells remained a friend and occasional visitor, and through her work, she helped other women in situations similar to what Fiona had endured. Fiona herself became involved in this work, offering her home as a temporary refuge for women fleeing violence, sharing her story to give others hope that survival was possible, that healing was possible. Dr. Morrison, growing older but still sharp as ever, became like a grandfather to Samuel and Rose. He taught them about medicine and science, encouraging their curiosity and intelligence. When he finally retired, he told Fiona that watching her transform from the broken girl Elijah had carried through his door to the strong, confident woman she had become was one of the great joys of his long career. Samuel, at 20, married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, a smart, capable young woman named Lucy, who fit into the Larkin family as if she had always been there. A year later, they made Fiona and Elijah grandparents with the birth of a little girl they named Fiona Rose. When Elijah placed his granddaughter in Fiona's arms for the first time, both of them were crying. "We did it," Elijah said softly. "We built a family, a real family, the kind we both always wanted." We did, Fiona agreed, looking down at the sleeping baby in her arms, thinking about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. We really did. Rose left for Carson City at 18 to attend the teacher's college there, and though Fiona missed her desperately, she was proud beyond words. Her daughter was getting an education, pursuing her dreams, becoming exactly the kind of strong, independent woman Fiona had always hoped she would be. Rose wrote long letters home describing her studies, her friends, the life she was building, and every word made Fiona's heart swell with love and pride. The ranch itself became something of a legend in Nevada. People traveled from other states to buy horses from Elijah Larkin, knowing that his animals were the best trained, the most reliable, the most suited to the harsh demands of Western life. Elijah and Samuel worked together seamlessly, and as Elijah grew older, he began to step back, allowing his son to take on more of the leadership. On a cool autumn evening in 1905, Fiona and Elijah sat together on the porch as they had done countless times over the years. They were both in their early 40s now, their hair showing threads of silver, their faces lined with years of sun and work and laughter. Samuel and Lucy lived in their own house on the ranch property with their 3 children. Rose had returned to Silver Peak to teach at the local school and was engaged to a young lawyer who treated her like she hung the moon. "Do you ever think about that day?" Elijah asked suddenly. "The day I found you?" "Sometimes," Fiona said, "though it feels like a lifetime ago, like it happened to a different person." "In some ways it did," Elijah said. "You are not that scared, hurt girl anymore, Fiona. You are the strongest woman I have ever known." "I am only strong because you gave me the chance to be," Fiona said, "because you believed in me when I did not believe in myself." "We saved each other," Elijah said, taking her hand. "That is what I have always believed. I found you in the snow, but you gave me a reason to be the man I always wanted to be. You gave me purpose and love and a family. Every good thing in my life has come from you." Fiona leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "I never thought I could be this happy," she admitted. "For so long, I thought happiness was something other people got, not me, but you changed all that." "I love you," Elijah said simply. "I have loved you from the moment I saw you, and I will love you until the moment I die, and beyond that if there is anything beyond." "I love you too," Fiona said, "always." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. In the distance they could hear their grandchildren playing, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Inside the house, a fire crackled in the hearth, the same hearth that had warmed Fiona that first terrible and wonderful night. The years continued to pass as years do. Samuel took over the ranch completely when Elijah's joints grew too stiff with arthritis to work like he once had. Rose's children grew and thrived, carrying forward the legacy of strength and kindness that Fiona and Elijah had worked so hard to create. The ranch remained successful, adapting to the changing times, to the slow modernization that was transforming even the remote corners of Nevada. Elijah died peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1918, at the age of 60. Fiona woke to find him beside her, gone in the night without pain or fear, just slipping quietly away. The grief was immense, a physical pain that made it hard to breathe, hard to think. But even in the depths of her mourning, Fiona found gratitude. They had had 35 years together, 35 years of love and partnership and building something meaningful. Not everyone got that. Not everyone was as lucky as they had been. At Elijah's funeral, standing beside her children and grandchildren, Fiona thought about the promises he had made to her over the years, that he would protect her, that he would love her, that they would build a life together, and she realized that he had kept every single one, every promise, every vow, every word. He had been true until the very end. Fiona lived for another 12 years after Elijah's death. She stayed on the ranch, helping where she could, delighting in her growing family. Samuel and Lucy had 5 children in total. Rose and her husband had 3. There were great-grandchildren, too, a whole new generation carrying the Larkin name and the values Fiona and Elijah had worked so hard to instill. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the man who had saved her life and given her everything. She told them about the importance of standing up for what was right, of protecting those who could not protect themselves, of building something that would last beyond your own lifetime. And she told them about love, real love, the kind that endures through hardship and pain and the simple passage of time. On a spring morning in 1930, Fiona passed away in her sleep, exactly as Elijah had, peacefully and without suffering. She was 67 years old. At her funeral, the church in Silver Peak was packed with people whose lives she had touched. Former women she had helped, students Rose had taught who remembered the kind woman who had always had cookies and wisdom to share, ranchers and business people who had worked with the Larkins over the decades. They spoke of her strength, her kindness, her unwavering commitment to making the world better than she had found it. But more than anything, they spoke of the love story. The cowboy who had found a broken woman in the snow and carried her to safety. The woman who had survived unimaginable cruelty and chosen to build a life of love anyway. The partnership that had lasted 3 decades and created a legacy that would endure for generations. Samuel, now a man in his mid-40s with silver threading through his dark hair just like his father's had, stood at his mother's graveside and thought about everything she had taught him, about courage and resilience and the power of choosing love over fear, about standing up to bullies and protecting the vulnerable and building something that would outlast you. Beside him, Rose held her own children close, tears streaming down her face. She thought about her mother's stories, about the girl who had been pushed down the stairs and left to die, about the cowboy who had refused to let that happen. She thought about how that single act of kindness, that moment of choosing to stop and help when it would have been easier to ride past, had changed everything, had created their entire family, this whole beautiful legacy. As they lowered Fiona's casket into the ground beside Elijah's, as the spring wind whispered through the Nevada mountains, as the sun shone bright and warm on the small cemetery, Samuel spoke the words that seemed to sum up everything. "She was the strongest person I ever knew," he said. "And she taught us all what it means to survive, to thrive, to build something beautiful out of pain. Mom and Dad, they showed us what love looks like. Real love. The kind that saves you and changes you and makes you want to be better. That is their legacy. That is what they gave us." And in the years that followed, as the Larkin family continued to grow and flourish, as the ranch passed from Samuel to his children and then to theirs, as the story of Fiona and Elijah became family legend told to each new generation, that legacy endured. The legacy of a woman who refused to let cruelty break her, of a man who chose kindness when kindness mattered most, of a love story that began in the snow and lasted forever. The old ranch house still stood decades later, a historical landmark now, preserved as a reminder of Silver Peak's history. Visitors walked through the rooms, read the plaques that told the story of the Larkin family, of the woman who had been saved and had gone on to save others in turn. They looked at the photographs on the walls, at Fiona and Elijah young and strong and building their dream, at their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carrying that dream forward. And sometimes, on cold winter evenings when the snow fell soft and silent over Nevada, people said you could feel something in that old house. Not a ghost exactly, but a presence, a warmth, a sense of love so strong it had soaked into the very walls and would never truly leave. It was the love of a cowboy who had found a woman in the snow and carried her to safety. The love of a woman who had survived hell and chosen hope anyway. The love that had built a family, a legacy, a story worth telling. It was the love that had changed everything. And it was the love that, in its own way, would last forever.